Is everyone ready? I love it when the song doesn't load. The last 2 weeks, I've been covering the release of 10th edition. First, we talked about the core rules and how broken they were. Immediately after, I showed you how you could break the Space Marine Codex. The week after, we realized that Deathwatch Sternguard could put out 90 mortal wounds. And you could take 2 units of them. Things that we've seen in 10th edition on its launch before it's officially released on the 24th of June has been tiresome, to say the least. There's been a lot of problems. Now, before I get into the problems, I do want to say, overall, I think 10th edition is a great game. 10th edition is a really good game. It has a lot of things done really, really well, and the studio team has smashed it out the park. However, on the flip side, there are a lot of problems with 10th edition, and a lot of things that were spotted very, very quickly, and that is a big issue. It's a real shame that they've been spotted so quickly, because it feels like with maybe a little bit of more robust playtesting, maybe. I don't know what the playtesting system is, but with a more robust playtesting system, maybe sending out rules earlier to a group of people to like have a look over it and spot these things, we would have avoided a lot of it. And we're going to talk about some of the main problems with 10th edition and some of the main things that people are having an issue with, whether they are playing casually, competitively, or somewhere in the middle. I'm going to talk about the general issues that people are starting to find with 10. Now, I made some notes, so here goes. If you've got any problems that you want me to talk about, then do let me know in the chat or leave a comment down below, because the more we talk about the problems, the more likely the problems get fixed, and then we find new problems. One of the main things that Games Workshop has said is that the game now is less lethal. They've said everything's less lethal, and everyone's looked at the data sheets and you've gone, oh, that's got less AP. Oh, that's got less attacks, or that strength's down, or that toughness has gone up. But the problem is, I think, is that as well as everything getting less lethal, everything has also got very, very cheap. Now, the thing is with that is because everything is really cheap, you have a lot more stuff on the board. You don't have an as lethal army. You just have more guns now. And everyone is going to have a lot more units on the board, but you have so many more tools to deal with the problematic units that your opponent is bringing. And it is starting to feel, again, just a little bit like Alpha Strike. I've played multiple games of 10th edition, and every game, round about turn 3, one of our armies is basically on its last legs. Almost tabled. It's not looking good for like less lethal. Everything is less lethal, but we have like 20 to 30% more shooting compared with it we did in 9th edition. It's written less lethal, but you have way more stuff, so you're finding that you just got less stuff on the board by turn 3, and that's probably how they're making the game go faster, because you got more stuff, so your opponent has less time to move it because they've got less stuff because you got more guns. So, like, less lethal is one side, but also you have more stuff. It's like, yeah, that one unit isn't decimated one unit now, but for the same price of your one unit before, you've got 3. It feels a little bit weird. It feels like we've gone like, oh, the game's less lethal, but we've also just, here's way more stuff to play with. Whereas really, they should have gone, the game's less lethal, the points are basically the same, so you have the same amount of stuff, but you're not killing it as fast. That's why one of the big issues I've had, I think. I've just noticed that more and more, I get to around turn 3, and my army is basically tabled anyway. All their army is tabled. Or like close to death. It's where you know the game is already a foregone conclusion. And I think that's why they introduced the Gambit system into the mission deck, the Gambit system is quite fun. Spoiler alert. Right, here we go. So, I am in wholly within 1 quarter. I have to roll a 12 with +1 to get 30 VP to get me the moral victory.
Do you want to borrow a Strands dice?
No, here's an 11. Oh, let's go! Oh, let's go! The gambits are very, very hard to do, and they don't really make you win the game. They just make you lose less, which doesn't really fix anything. If sometimes, especially in tournaments, especially when you're just playing a casual game, it doesn't matter if you won or lost by like 1 point, you still lost. Again, it was a foregone conclusion at turn 3 anyway, so why have I had to play out 2 turns, tried to roll a double 6, and it didn't work. But the other thing as well is one of the best things in 40k, in my opinion, one of the things that probably like made and broke competitive games was melee or melee combat. Players could like really utilize all of the tools in their toolbox with pilings, consolidates, tagging, tri-pointing, all of these words that we picked up over the editions, utilizing combat to its full potential, is, in my opinion, one of the best parts of 9th edition. And it does feel like that has just been completely taken away this new edition. And the whole reasoning for it, one of the main reasons was they just wanted to make combat clean, and they didn't want to give you free movement, which I totally understand. Because getting free movement just because you charge something is weird. Like, oh, I'm going to charge this one guy in the middle with my entire army. One guy's going to punch him, and then the rest of my army is going to move 6 inches. And it's like, oh yeah, that is pretty dumb. That is pretty weird, to be honest. But the problem is comparatively now compared to then, it was like, oh, yeah, I'm going to use this. I'm going to leapfrog and do some cool shit, you know, and make it a bit exciting. But the problem is when you go, oh, yeah, look, everything just charges as close as possible. It can't pile in. It can't consolidate unless it's going onto an objective or another enemy unit. It makes combat feel really bland, in my opinion. I'm going to shove all my models into the middle, fight. I'm going to shove them onto the objective. There's no back and forth, I don't think. And the other problem is like, because things are less lethal, that when you do finally make combat, going through all of those guns, because they've got more units to shoot at your combat units before they get there, you just bounce. Like, everything's just less lethal, so you don't have enough. The reason that everything feels more lethal is because all of your shooting units that can shoot are shooting, whereas when one combat unit finally makes it, not a lot happens. Like a Brutalis Dreadnought running in, going to grab something, and then he like misses with half of his attacks, and then they got an in-run. Again, I'm talking about all the problems, but a lot of the problems in isolation are fine. The problem is when you start adding them all up, it becomes a bit rubbish. Between getting Overwatch 30 times before reaching melee is an issue. That is also very true, because Overwatch, something I've already brought up as well, being able to Overwatch every single movement phase is very, very strong, and it just pushes more shooting armies. I think with 9th edition, with the right terrain setup, you had a good mix of having some really good shooting armies, but struggle on this board because there's loads of terrain, so melee armies do way better. Vice versa, we've got an open board, so shooting armies do really well. So it's always nice to bring a balanced army, but it does feel like, with my very early experience of 10th edition, because, you know, I've had it for a little while because Games Workshop sent a lot of it to me early, but it just feels like, you are more pushed towards taking a shooting-based army right now, because shooting with Overwatch and stuff like that, it just all adds up, and a lot of shooting armies have a lot of good special rules, whereas a lot of combat armies don't. But yeah, that's like a big problem with melee, with combat. I think it does feel like as soon as you make combat after you've been Overwatched 40 times, you actually just bounce and nothing happens. But also, going back to it with shooting, devastating wounds. Oh my lord. Devastating wounds is by far one of the dumbest rules I've ever seen. When Votann came out in 9th edition, people were in outcry about guns becoming mortal wounds and damage spilling. And it was actually ridiculous, you know? The only few times you got that were special mortal wound psychic powers, such as Smite, or basically combat with Plague Marines with Plague Flails. That is pretty much the only 2 times you saw damage spill. But they made it in shooting, and everyone was in outcry. And they also, with Votann in 9th edition, allowed you to manipulate the dice to get easier mortal wounds, and it's essentially the equivalent of devastating wounds. Now, devastating wounds to me definitely feels like a rule they wrote whilst they were writing Votann, before they were writing Votann, and they're like, you know what, that's a cool mechanic, and then wrote it directly into 10th edition, only then to release the Votann Codex to the public, and the public go, actually, this is really stupid, and then them change it. But Devastating Wounds does feel like that mechanic of, oh, this is a really cool mechanic, we'll put it in Votann, or we'll also put it in 10th. The Votann Codex gets released in 9th edition, and then they've gone, oh, actually, that's a really dumb rule, we should write that out. And then they haven't had a chance to write it out of 10th edition because it's all gone to print. And with that, with Devastating Wounds, obviously, like, if you've got a gun that's shooting, and you roll to hit, and you roll to wound, and you happen to roll a couple of 6s, it's probably fine. It's probably that it's not a great deal. The real problem is, with Devastating Wounds, is all of the mechanics that can manipulate your dice, whether it's a reroll, flat choose, flat put in the dice and roll it onto a 6 for free, anti. All of these manipulations make devastating wounds one of the weirdest, strongest, most broken rules in the game, in my opinion. This is me talking about someone who has felt the power of the Eldar right where it hurts, you know? But the thing is even still, without looking at Eldar, which we will talk about, like for example, I've been enjoying running the Gladiator Reaper. It's 12 shots, it's twin linked, so it rerolls wounds, and it has devastating wounds. So what I'm finding is that even if I need 2s to wound against the unit, I'm like, what if I just re-roll them all, because I re-roll all wound rolls, and just trying to fish for some more 6s so they don't get any save and they just take a mortal instead? Now that's really strong. That's really good, you know? 12 shots, hitting on 3s, potentially full re-rolls with Oath and Moment, but let's say no. So 9 of those shots are hitting, because it's 3s to hit. If I'm against infantry, the 6s are becoming 3 hits rather than 1, because of sustained hits 2 against infantry. And then it's basically 6s re-rolling. I might cause some wounds, but I might cause some mortals as well. And that's really good. That's really strong. But it's only 1 damage, so it doesn't feel so bad. But obviously, with Eldar, and lots of other things, but Eldar are the most notorious because we're going to go on to Fate Dice and stuff like that, but Eldar are the most notorious because they have a heavy access to devastating wounds, and they have the Fate Dice. We'll talk about Fate Dice in particular when we talk about Eldar as a whole, but the fact is you have rerolls, you have Fate Dice, you have anti, which triggers devastating wounds on whatever anti-X you have, anti-monster 4+, on a 4 you're going to make mortals. Anything like that, being able to interact with what should be a 1 in 6 chance. A 1 in 6 chance is, oh, I roll a 6. That means it does better. Cool. Whereas actual fact that you just see loads of rules being able to manipulate those dice, and it doesn't feel fair because it's like, oh, yeah, you're going to do mortals 1/6 of the time, but you re-roll, or oh, you're going to do mortals 1/6 of the time, and you're just going to put the 6 in there, or with Deathwatch, which Games Workshop have already addressed, because Deathwatch with the Sternguard for 1 CP could do mortals on 2s to wound, re-rolling, and it was like, wait a minute, we've got full rerolls to hit, we've got full rerolls to wound, and 2s to wound and mortal wounds against infantry. That's 45 mortal wounds, and you can shoot again. And Games Workshop were very quick to address that, and it was great. It was really good of Games Workshop to address that, and I applaud them for it. You know, whether I influence them or not is another question. But I applaud Games Workshop for being so proactive with a digital rule set to go, oh, actually, this interaction isn't very good, and they should be doing that now. They need to be more proactive. They need to be like, oh, actually, this mechanic as a whole is a problem, because the update to Deathwatch, if you didn't see it, here we go. So Hellfire rounds. Now it says, until the end of the phase, range weapons, excluding devastating wounds weapons, equipped by models in your unit have the anti-infantry 2+ and anti-monster 5+ rule. Now, obviously, when we reviewed this last week, just a week ago, it got updated on Tuesday or Wednesday. They didn't have this limitation, but now what you have is a unit, or like multiple units in the Space Marine book, that can't interact with this stratagem, which in my opinion is the wrong way to do it. It is just flat out the wrong way. And it's because how anti is worded. Now, I think anti does need changing, and I tweeted about this. Follow me on Twitter, the Hellstorm Mikey. I think anti as a whole, because what anti does is, if you don't realize how the mechanic works, is anti is whatever you roll. If you roll equal to or above the anti value, so 2+ in this example, it causes a critical wound, or it causes a critical wound. And a critical wound is obviously anything that is a 6 to wound is a critical wound, because it implies that 6s always wound, no matter what your toughness is. So anti makes your dice go from a 2 to count as a 6. And this is another way that Games Workshop has allowed you to manipulate dice for mortal wounds, for devastating wounds in particular. Now, I think anti should be more like poison. So it's like, regardless of the toughness, it always wounds on this, you know? Which actually changes, going from 2+ counts as a 6 to 2+ counts as a wound, but 6s still trigger. So it would be a lot cleaner on this stratagem to be like not excluding devastating wound weapons, because that means the Stern Guard just can't interact with this stratagem anymore, which is a real shame. But if you had like anti as a previous poison weapon where 2+ ignores the toughness, for example, then you still roll to hit and roll to wound as normal. 2s still wound, but only natural 6s cause anything special like devastating wounds. Because I think having rules like this as a fix is a bad fix, when the real issue is the interaction between anti and devastating wounds. Now, obviously, if they did that, they'd affect a lot of armies, but I also think that a lot of people would appreciate something that's a little bit cleaner, rather than going, everything works the same way except for that unit in particular, which, in my opinion, isn't the way to balance things. I don't think that's fair for Deathwatch players. I don't think it's bad for the game, because every time there's a new stratagem, they're going to have to go, oh, actually, does that trigger this? Right, no, you can't use it either. That's something I'm really disappointed with, because I think devastating wounds as a mechanic is fine without manipulation. I think anti as a mechanic without manipulation is fine as well. It's when you stack these together. Thank you very much for watching. We're only on 0.3 of 9, I'm afraid. But if you like this stream, consider liking it. But also, if you want to support the channel, you can become a member. We're going to get 10 members. Look at that. We're at 2. We need 8 more. You can become a member for as little as £2 a month, or £1.99, which is really cool. If you're feeling extra generous, you can gift memberships as well. If you are new to the channel, make sure you allow gifts so people can make you a member. And then you can join our Discord, following the link that's just appeared in chat. That's really cool. It's a really cool place. I'm there. We mode about 10th edition. It's great. However, devastating wounds as a whole is a problem. And I think, really, devastating wounds shouldn't go to mortals, because having guns that become mortal wounds with so much manipulation is a bit of an issue. I think it should be closer to something like devastating wounds is AP 5, or ignores armor saves, or even ignores invulnerable saves, because I think that would be okay as well. I don't think anyone would have an issue with that, because what that means is when you roll a 6 to wound, you're going to kill whatever you're shooting, or you're going to do a whole lot of damage. So maybe make devastating wounds ignore invulnerable saves, which is very close to what they're going for, I think. But the problem is when you have devastating wounds on a big anti-tank weapon that goes into a unit and wipes the unit, it does feel pretty bad. If it's 1 damage, like I mentioned, the Gladiator Reaper, 1 damage, yeah, that's probably arguably better at killing infantry. But that's what it's designed to do. Let's talk about Indirect, the elephant in the room, or the elephant in the other room that can still shoot you, should I say. So, Indirect is a great mechanic, because it makes sense. We're in the 41st millennium. They're going to have guns that don't need line of sight. We've got bugs that fly, that have claws out of their arms. We have robots that are from 65 million years ago. They're older than dinosaurs and they're alive. It's okay to have Indirect, but Games Workshop have never had the finesse to balance an indirect weapon. It's always give with one hand and then give with the other as well. Just take this. It's dangerous to go alone. Take 30 Desolators. Because Indirect is obviously still very strong, especially when you have units such as Desolation Marines that are quite undercosted and also ignore the indirect rules when they stand still. 10th edition, with leading units, with characters joining units and giving that unit a really good buff, is pushing more and more people to start thinking, oh, maybe I'll take a big maxed out unit and attach a character to it. So, for example, 10 Desolators and an Apothecary, but also like 10 Terminators, you know, a big fat unit of Deathwatch veterans, you know. There's loads of other stuff. You're more likely to take a big unit to attach a character to it to 1, protect the character, and 2, maximize the stratagems and buffs from that character in particular. But the problem is then they introduced Blast and then made Indirect really cheap. And most Indirect has Blast. Now, I was shooting 10 Desolators, 10 Desolators and Deathwatch Marines, units of 10, and I was getting minimum 30 shots that explode on 5s, which is very dumb. Very, very dumb. Because obviously you got enhancements, you got stratagems, etc. And you've got Blast. Now adding 1 to each dice roll for the number of models in that unit. So if you're shooting a unit of 10, if you have Blast, it's whatever you have shots plus 2. Which in a Desolator's case is D3 plus 2. So D3 plus 2, you gain a minimum of 40 shots. And then you're rolling to hit, you're probably re-rolling, you're getting exploding 5s because sustained hits 5 because of the Devastating Doctrine and Storm of Fire stratagem. You're getting a load of hits. I had 10 D3 shots and caused 38 wounds at AP1. Or maybe AP2, I can't remember. But then you have this unit that just ignores the rules, ignores the -1, ignores the indirect, ignores the benefit of cover, and it's really cheap. And I found a lot of units are very, very cheap. Such as the Whirlwind as well. The Whirlwind chassis is 125 points. It is severely undercosted. I've got plenty of Whirlwinds and plenty of Desolators. Games Workshop, don't nerf him until I've won a tournament, okay? Don't nerf him until I've won a tournament first. That's all I'm saying. They are problematic. They are a bit of an issue. So there's lots of indirect. There's obviously guard indirect as well, like Earthshaker carriers and Basilisks and whatever. But because everything's less lethal, guys, you just have more of it to shoot indirect, which is a problem. Biggest elephants in the room is anything with towering. What are you going to do about towering? So towering is a rule on Imperial Knights and big stuff, big walkers like that, where ruins don't interact in terms of visibility. Whereas if you can see them through buildings, they can see you, and vice versa. Towering's a really big issue, and the main reason is because we've been playing a game where towering or Imperial Knights can't see through walls, can't see through buildings, etc. But especially because in 8th edition, a lot of people were ready for that, and they had ruins and buildings and terrain that was prepared for Imperial Knights. And then they introduced obscuring as a rule, where Knights couldn't see through, but things could see back at them. And it always felt unfair to the Imperial Knights player, which is totally fine. But then they've gone the other way and gone Imperial Knights and stuff like that ignore obscuring equivalent of what we have in ruins today. And so do you. Which I think is the wrong way. What they should have done is gone, oh, you can't see the knight because it's behind the ruin. You can't see through the smoke. You know, rather than going, oh, you can see each other now. Because the problem is nobody's terrain, even the ones that Games Workshop sell, except for a very small amount of kits, maybe 3. All of the terrain has windows and stuff in, so Imperial Knights can just see across the board. And they're a lot tougher. They have a 2+ save. They have a lot of good anti-tank weapons, which are very good at killing most things in the game. So you just get Imperial Knights walking across the board and swarming because they can just see anything, because they can see everywhere through windows. And they just have such good guns that they can just pick up entire armies in 2 turns. So the problem is towering, ignoring rules, with anti-tank weapons that can shoot anything. It should be, in my opinion, the other way, whereas, like, no one can see each other. Like, you have an Imperial Knight sneaking around a corner, yeah, fine, but also, it might feel a bit weird that you can't see an Imperial Knight that's just there. You know, it's just there, I can see it from the window, but I can't shoot it. But we have to balance that, it's a game that's supposed to be fair, and you are actively writing a competitive pack called the Chapter Approved Tournament Pack, and you are writing things that make it not fair because you're like, oh well, in the law you'd be able to see that Imperial Knight goes on break, and it's like, yeah, but we can leave like a level of like realism at home because we're playing a board game with tape measures. Everyone should be playable against other factions of elites, and if not, quickly gets there.
Knight and it see them, but the same vehicle can't see a unit the other side of the terrain it's touching.
Exactly, Starius. Look at that. We don't agree on a lot of things, Starius, but we are agreeing tonight. You know, there's a clip of me saying, "Why is this in the game where I can't see a guy who's right in front of me because of the terrain, but a knight can see me across the board? What's going on?" But lone operative as a rule is very, very strong. And I think lone operative as a rule is quite good to have in the game. Because lone operative basically means that you can't target a unit unless you're within 12. Now, for a lot of things, that's quite good. But I do think that if you're going to have special characters with lone operative, why can't I target them with sniper rifles? Sniper rifles have the precision special rule, and there's a lot of things that has the precision special rule, which is specifically for targeting characters in units. Why doesn't the precision rule let me target characters not in units that are lone operative? It's very weird because then you get some really buff characters like the Lion, Goleman, you know, essentially scouts, because scouts essentially have lone operative. Why doesn't precision interact with that? Because then what you get is all of these insanely good characters either buffing the entire army, you can't interact with it, or charging at you and you can only interact with it at the last minute. On its own, not protected, why can't you target a character with a sniper rifle? Skill issue. I agree now. Just a skill issue, to be honest. Lone operative would be fine if you could be like, oh, in case my opponent has lone operative, I'm going to take some sniper rifles as a counter. There's no counter. There's no back and forth with lone operative. It's just, I can't interact. Come at me if you have to, or I'm going to have to go at you, and you're probably a big scary guy. But the final one of the core rules, Overwatch. Overwatch is just way too cumbersome, in my opinion. Overwatch is a stratagem in the core rules that you can use once per turn, and you can shoot a unit anytime it ends a move or starts a move, no matter what type of move, including charging. Obviously, when it's in the charge phase, it's like, oh, you don't want to Overwatch when I'm about to charge, it's fine. But they've made it so you can shoot at a unit every time it moves, which creates really cumbersome movement phases where you go, I've moved my unit, do you want to Overwatch? No? Okay. Right, I'm going to move this unit, do you want to Overwatch? No? Alright, I've moved it. Do you want to Overwatch? No? Okay. Now I'm going to start on this unit. Do you want to Overwatch? And it's really weird. It's just very cumbersome. In my opinion, it should be at the end of the movement phase. You know, if you're going to have it in the movement phase as well, at the end of the movement phase, you can Overwatch a unit that's moved, you know? Having it at the start at the end makes sense rules-wise, but, like, playing-wise, it's just really cumbersome because it's like, you know, it's every 2 seconds you're going to be like, do you want to Overwatch? And I got to a point where I was just telling my opponents, I was just like, just Overwatch him at the end. If you could see the unit, that's fine, because we all agree. Do it. I'm going to start moving. You just tell me when you want to Overwatch. I'm not going to keep asking. Because it feels really cumbersome. But it also, as we're going back to melee being really bland and really hard to do, it's just like 5 Overwatch phases for an opponent, if you've got Indirect especially. Just be like, have you got a combat unit coming in? Right, I'm going to Overwatch. 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 Are you going to charge? Right, I'm going to Overwatch. Oh, you made it with one guy? Okay, nothing happened. I'm going to kill you back. So that's the problems, in my opinion, with the core rules. Now, I've been looking. Obviously, I played against Eldar on Friday. And it was an experience. Now, safe to say, I did almost win that game. Okay? I only lost by a single point. Okay? If I hadn't got mad and just ignored the Wraith Knight, would have won. Okay? The problem is with Eldar is everything. But in all seriousness, Eldar just take everything that we've learned about the problems with the core rules and just maximize it to full. And the main thing is they have a lot of access to devastating wounds. They have all of their Wraith guns, all of their D platforms and stuff like that. All the things that are very obvious, they have access to all of it, and it's very, very cheap. It's all very undercosted. Like a Wraith Knight being 370 points is just way too cheap. It's very, very dumb. And I think we can all agree that is way too cheap. But the fact is they have all of these abilities, all of these guns, sorry, and they have abilities that can guarantee rolls, you know? You have fate dice that can guarantee maximum wounds and maximum damage, because obviously you're wanting 6 to wounds to cause devastating, and then you can drop in flat wounds to do damage and just kill units, you know? Oh, you got a unit of 10 there, I'm going to drop in 2 5s for fate dice and just cause 10 mortal wounds. That's just them dead, you know? Sisters of Battle, Adeptus Sororitas, have a very similar ability, but they aren't nearly as powerful because Sisters don't have access to devastating wounds. They get miracle dice. They get 1 per turn, or sometimes they get 2 if they're very lucky. They don't have access to devastating wounds like Eldar do. They just don't have that. They don't have the output compared. They don't have the weapons that can use miracle dice to the maximum. But yeah, so like fate dice, you get all of these dice at the start of the game. Like 12 of them. You can re-roll if you want better results. But then you have access to loads of guns that are really good at like doing high damage, flat devastating, doing straight mortals. And you can get a free fate dice for every objective you hold with Guardians. And these units are like 110 points. For 10 Guardians, you'll slap them on an objective at the home, slap them on one safe in the middle. That's 2 free fate dice every single turn. And then Farseers, Farseers flip one within 12. Just do a flat 6, all right? You want more wounds? There you go. Enjoy. You want more wounds? There you go. Enjoy. The fact that the Farseer ability to make a fate dice, a 6, in my opinion, is fine. If it was on the unit it was leading. If it's because it's on any unit within 12, it feels really silly. Again, Sisters have a character that could do the same ability only to the unit that it's leading. It does not have a range. It does not have an ability within the X. It's just the unit that's leading can use a miracle dice and count it as a 6. Once per battle round, sorry. That's just like, that's fine, because you've paid for this unit. You pay for this character. Now this unit gets better because of this one character. Whereas Eldar can go, all you lot, listen to me. Who wants devastating first? You have devastating. You have devastating. You have devastating. And it's really crazy. Like, another problem is Eldar can reroll a hit and a wound for free. That's their army ability. So I don't know if you realised, but what you can do is you can roll to hit with a dice, you know, and reroll. And then you can roll to wound. And then if you don't roll what you like, you know, you can re-roll one of them and use a fate dice. So you actually get a free chance at rolling a 6 before you have to use a fate dice. Because you can re-roll a dice and then use the fate dice to automatically guarantee it. That's like... And I don't understand how you can be like, yeah, what we're going to do is have fate dice mechanic, automatic 6 fate dice mechanic, and let you re-roll a wound roll mechanic all together. Oh, I didn't roll any 6s, so I'm going to re-roll one of them and just make it a 6. So you basically guarantee a fate dice on a 6 or a devastating wound roll every time a unit shoots. You know, you can only do it once per battle round with a Farseer, but then you can still re-roll everyone else with a free re-roll to hit. You know what I love about dice games? The ability to re-roll everything. So very fun for my opponent to draw things out for both of us. Also, hi Retro, how you doing, buddy? Absolute sexy, man. Absolute sexy. Jules to Live and Let's Dice in chat. Thanks for tuning in, buddy. But yeah, like, what's worse than re-rolling everything is just not re-rolling and choosing the number you like and dropping that in instead. Or why, if you roll and you don't get it, just put a dice in instead. You know, when you got this one from earlier, you want that one? All right, here you go, mate. Here you go. Little treat for you. Little 6 for you. They're like fucking baby birds, and the mama fate dice is just throwing up in our mouths, and all we can taste is 6s. And yeah, why the hell are fire prisms 125 points? That's another question. That's the one for another day. A lot of these problems that we've talked about were spotted very, very quickly, to a point where people were spotting problems with units before the books were released, before the indexes came out. On their own exhibition games, their preview games that Games Workshop were doing, they had Eldar on there, for example. People already were like, oh shit, this is a real issue. These are really strong. I also think that anything that has access to devastating wounds in its current form, you shouldn't be able to manipulate the dice to choose a number. I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's fair at all. Now, re-rolling into a devastating wounds is totally fine. I don't think anti should interact with devastating wounds. I don't think fate dice should interact with devastating wounds. But all of these things do. Problem is the core rules have real issues, and then the indexes are written to abuse those core rules, because that's how codexes work. Codexes overwrite the core rules, you know? We have all these rules. This is the Bible of how Warhammer works, and as soon as you start playing the game, half your army ignores those core rules and has special abilities. That's what they're called. Eldar do need tuning down, but the whole every fate dice is going to be a 6 is nonsense. You'll get 3 from your pool and 1 per turn with 12 inch of a seer. Yeah, exactly. The thing is with fate dice is you roll 12 dice, no matter what you roll, 5 of them are a 6. No matter what you roll, if you got a 1 Farseer sat at the back, all 5 of those dice count as 6. Plus whatever else you want. So there you go. They're the main problems. I think Eldar should just bin Phantasm, but I'm trying not to just bully Eldar too much. I'm talking about like the main core rules, the problems with the core rules and how armies are abusing it. I think some of the core rules are really good. A lot of the game is really good. I've mentioned some things that I don't like, some things that I think are bland. But Eldar feel worse because they are abusing the strongest rule in the game, and it's devastating wounds, you know?